The sounds of the Ukrainian war echo in the cities of Russia. Cities of the Russian Federation near the Ukrainian border have been frequently attacked by drones since the start of the war. There have been a number of critical attacks on Russian military infrastructure such as airports, military depots, fuel depots, and even Russian munitions and military vehicle factories. The most important purpose of these attacks is to make Russia uneasy and demoralize Russia. The war potential of a country that cannot resist the attacks within its borders will also be interrupted. Thus, Ukraine will be one step closer to victory. While Ukraine continues its struggle to liberate its homeland, Russia is struggling with explosions. The last of these explosions occurred in the strategic Russian city of Bryansk the other day. Russia's robot tank factory was engulfed in flames in the Dyakovo settlement in the Bryansk region of the Russian Federation. The military facility was the only one of its kind in Russia. The fire started at 8:28 am. Emergency crews came to the scene and gave first aid. It was reported that the fire was extinguished at 9:13 am. as a result of the work of 5 firefighters. According to preliminary data, no casualties were reported in the region. The cause of the fire remains unclear, however, considering the attacks that have taken place in Russia since the beginning of the Ukraine war. The allegations that the facility was attacked by sabotage are getting stronger. Officials did not realize any reports on the fire or its consequences. It should also be noted that the city of Dyakovo is located in the northeast of the Bryansk region. The distance to the Ukrainian border is more than 140 kilometers. This is the distance that Ukraine's kamikaze drones can easily reach. The fact that Kiev has Storm Shadow missiles with a range of 250 kilometers leaves Russian cities near the border vulnerable. On the other hand, Alexander Research and Production Company, besides producing Russian Uran-9 robot tanks, work under the order of the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation for the design and development of high-precision optical parts and systems, especially for aviation, space, military, and special equipment. The enterprise made a difference by producing the Uran-9 track-ton man-ground light tank with its own products. The unmanned light tank is designed for fire support of ground forces during hostilities and reconnaissance. Russian Uran-9 robot tanks are extremely deadly. The Russian army first used the Uran-9 robot tank in Syria, and recently it is also using it on the Ukrainian fronts. Russian-made Uran-9 robot tanks are specifically designed to provide combined combat reconnaissance and counter-terrorism units with remote reconnaissance and fire support. The Uran-9 can be used fully autonomously on a predefined route or can be operated manually by a man from a truck control station or via a small backpack control station. The Uran-9 is armed with a 30mm Shapunave 72 automatic cannon for ready-to-launch 9M121 Ataka. NATO reporting names Spiral 2 anti-tank guided missiles, 6 ready-to-fire guided missiles. The Uran-9 can also be armed with 4 Igla surface-to-air missiles on each side of the tower, are 2 Ataka launchers, and 3 Shmelem. The Ataka missile has radio command guidance and is also a beam using Saklos. This missile was designed to defeat tanks with composite armor and explosive reactive armor. It has an operating range of 400 meters to 6 kilometers. The Shmel flamethrower is a mechanical incendiary device designed to project a long, controllable stream of fire. As of December 20, 2022, 342 Uran-9 robot tanks were in service in the Russian army. But Ukraine may have destroyed several dozen of this special tank of the Russians at the front as a result of the air attack on the Uran-9 tank factory in the Bryansk region. Russia's capacity to produce military equipment decreased and the Russian army had to stop the operation of the only Uran-9 robot tank factory. This is seen as a very serious success for Ukraine. The factory, which produces the Uran-9 tank, also produces lenses and glasses for night vision binoculars that work with electro-optical devices. In addition, the company's products include spherical devices, sighting devices, variable and focal length lenses, including thermal imaging lenses and infrared rangefinders, Mira and Mira Prism optical systems, laser beam conversion systems, and various non-standard products as it is. Bryansk is frequently exposed to Ukrainian attacks. A tragic event in the skies of the Bryansk region on May 13 resulted in the loss of 11 pilots and the destruction of 2 Russian Mi-8 combat helicopters, a Su-35 fighter and a Su-34 fighter bomber. According to the Russian edition, Russian planes and helicopters were shot down by the American Patriot anti-aircraft missile system. Given the range at which Ukrainian air defense systems operate, it turns out that Kiev has deployed them only 40 kilometers from the Russian border. It should be noted that other versions of the tragic event have been put forward before one of these versions was attributed to Ukrainian saboteurs. It was alleged that Ukrainian saboteurs entered the Klintsovsky area of Bryansk and shot down the planes using portable anti-aircraft missile systems. Another version indicated that the destruction of Russian aircraft could be carried out by the armed forces of Ukraine operating from the Chernihiv region. There was no official statement from the Russian authorities regarding the attacks. The smokescreen over the tragic event still remains. In addition, this week, the Bryansk region was also frequented by unmanned aerial vehicles. According to an official of the Russian Ministry of Health, about 10 unmanned aerial vehicles were shot down in the attempted attack in the Bryansk region of Russia. According to the report, the official stated that some of the drones fell near the village of Kokhanovsk in the Klimovsky district of Bryansk, and some were shot down. The official stressed that other drones were shot down by electronic warfare systems. The official also reported that the drones did not cause any destruction. On the other hand, the Russians blew up the road between the Chernihiv region and Bryansk. The road is located on the border of Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus. It is located in St. Kievska Chernihiv region. In February, the governor of the Bryansk region, Alexander Bogomazov, exhibited structures built on the territory of the region. At the same time, the Russians are building fortifications on their territory to protect them from Ukrainian attacks. Inside these fortifications, the Dragon's Teeth were quite remarkable. Dragon's Tooth is an anti-tank barrier fortification first used during World War II. These were used to block the movement of tanks and mechanized infantry and be dispatched to the killing zones. But there is a detail that Russia has forgotten. This detail is that the Ukrainian armed forces are equipped with Western tanks. The Ukrainian army is broadcasting exercises where it grinds Dragon Teeth with British Challenger 2 tanks. Members of the Ukrainian armed forces conduct offensive training against obstacles known as Dragon's Teeth using British Challenger 2 tanks. This is a new step in the training of the Ukrainian army and allows them to more effectively overcome the obstacles set by the enemy. It seems that Russia is in a rather passive and helpless position in the face of Ukraine's attacks. We will see in the coming days whether Russia, which applied tactics from the Second World War to strengthen its defense, succeeds. Attacks on Russian cities, however, frustrate Moscow's defensive measures. Not only Bryansk, Belgorod, Rostov, and Krasnodar are also exposed to Ukrainian attacks. For example, drones attacked the Afipsky oil refinery in Russia's Krasnodar Krai. Earlier yesterday, dramatic footage of flames reaching the skies at a Russian oil refinery has surfaced online after Russian authorities reported that the country had carried out a drone attack on 2 oil facilities in the Krasnodar region. Huge flames were seen in videos circulating online that reportedly showed the fire at the Afipsky facility. The Afipsky oil refinery is located in the south of Russia, not far from the Black Sea port of Novorossiysk. The port of Novorossiysk was the headquarters of the Russian Black Sea Fleet until the annexation of Crimea in 2014. Since then, Russia has transferred the headquarters to the occupied port city of Sevastopol. On May 28, a major fire also broke out at the Ilsoil refinery, about 55 kilometers northeast of Novorossiysk. Local officials claim that a drone attack also caused the fire. Drone attacks on the Ilsk refinery on May 4th and May 5th were also reported by Russian authorities. The attacks caused fires at the facilities. In recent weeks, there have been increasing reports of attacks on rail networks and oil refineries on Russian soil. Drone attacks were also reported in various parts of Russia, including the oil unit of the Druzhba pipeline refinery in the Tver region of Russia. So far, no one has taken steps to claim responsibility for these attacks. Claimed fires and explosions are increasing day by day. So will Vladimir Putin be able to? Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the low voice that whispers, "I'll try again tomorrow." At the end of the day, the voice of courage rises among Ukrainian troops in Bakhmut. Ukrainian troops are becoming gigantic in the city of Bakhmut, which hosts the most violent clashes of the Eastern Front Line in this breathtaking small city where struggles are experienced and the tension doesn't decrease for a minute. Striking developments are taking place. What has happened in Bakhmut lately? Let's dive into the details of what happened in Bakhmut. When we got another Telegram chatbot, it is with them, known as the Palace Telephone, and with your permission to the principal person aggressiveness to become the voice of the indigenous group against. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky stated that he and his military leaders plan to maintain their presence in Bakhmut and hold the city despite the ongoing Russian aggression. Ukrainian forces face both regular Russian army forces and prisoners gathered by Wagner's special military group and filling their trenches in droves. There were intense clashes between the two as a result of these conflicts. Casualties were, of course, inevitable. However, the Kremlin administration is not releasing official casualty figures for Bakhmut or elsewhere. Although official casualties were not disclosed, the most abandoned city turned into a cemetery. The Russian army has lost thousands of men in Bakhmut in recent weeks. Most of these men were private soldiers working for the controversial Wagner Group. For every kilometer of land captured around the city of Bakhmut, hundreds of Russian soldiers were eliminated. Western officials say 30,000 Russian soldiers have been killed in the fighting for the Ukrainian city of Bakhmut since it began last summer. Officials add that the epic nature of the war was disproportionate to Bakhmut's strategic importance. Also, one official stated that for Ukraine, the Bakhmut war was a unique opportunity to neutralize many Russians. Although Western officials announced Russian losses, the Kremlin vehemently denied them. In a statement at a defense meeting published on Telegram, Sergei Shoigu stated that Ukraine lost 11,000 soldiers in just one day. Shoigu perhaps deliberately reversed Ukraine's criticism of Moscow's own human wave tactics. Sergei Shoigu said that the indifference of the Kiev regime towards its own people is surprising. As a result, the Ukrainian armed forces managed to corner 30,000 Russian soldiers in Bakhmut. About 180,000 Russian soldiers died on the front lines, including the casualties at Bakhmut. Still, the Russian forces are trying to advance in this small city. Despite the casualties, the Russian Ministry of Defense is strengthening the area, possibly with more troops, including elite VDV airborne forces. The Ukrainian army is fortifying the area to prevent the town from being taken over. Beyond Bakhmut, the conflict on land continues with no significant change in territorial control on either side. Combat reverted to the familiar patterns of static lines, small-scale attacks, and multiple artillery fire. As a matter of fact, both Ukrainian and Russian forces use artillery heavily to corrupt the opposing side and damage its reputation. Artillery continues to be responsible for the most casualties. There is very little maneuvering on the ground at the moment. However, that will change as Ukrainian forces counterattack in the coming weeks. The United States and the West are increasing their support for Ukraine so that the counterattack can be as successful as possible. In addition, the fighters of the armed forces of Ukraine carried out a series of successful counterattacks in the Donetsk direction. Kiev troops forced the Russian army to retreat from some positions. Currently, the Ukrainian army has positioned itself on new frontiers and is fortifying them for further defensive action. This was announced by Colonel Alexei Dmitrievsky, spokesman for the Joint Press Center of the Defense Forces of the Tavria direction. It was stated that the Russian army tried to attack the Stoptavdiivka, Marinka, and Kurlivka settlements again the other day. Russian attacks were thwarted by Ukrainian artillery with effective artillery fire. The Russian forces suffered significant losses. Russian forces had to retreat as a result of their losses. On the other hand, statistics were also given that the Russians carried out 30 attacks, 10 of which were at night in the last 24 hours with no results. Only one of these attacks was reinforced by 2 unit tanks. Using 2 tanks for only 1 attack out of 30 attacks is quite meaningful. This is the most concrete example of recent Russian tank losses. In order to better understand the Russian tank losses, it's useful to remember the breathtaking points in Avdiivka. As it is known, Russia focused its efforts on besieging Avdiivka, a town in eastern Ukraine. Avdiivka, about 136 kilometers south of Bakhmut, became the focus of Russian forces. Russian troops' gains in the region were limited and progress was slow and costly. Vladimir Putin's army made only marginal progress in the offensive in the Donetsk province at the expense of heavy losses in armored vehicles. The Russian military leadership has deployed some Kremlin-backed private mercenary Wagner Group elements in this area to reinforce their last limited advance in the city. The 10th Tank Regiment probably lost most of its tanks while trying to encircle Avdiivka from the south. The losses of the 10th Tank Regiment are most likely due to tactically flawed frontal attacks similar to those in recently unsuccessful Russian armored attacks such as around the town of Volodar. The mechanized infantry, together with the tanks, forms the core of the armored units as the combat effectiveness of tank units not supported by mechanized infantry decreases. Tank losses increase because, although the tank is very strong, it is a vehicle that also has weaknesses. Mechanized infantry guards the weak sides of the tanks, watches their flanks and rear, destroys anti-tank guns and tank destroyers in places that restrict the view and movement of tanks, such as in densely forested areas. Mechanized infantry units provide tanks with both close protection and situational awareness. If the infantry fails to fulfill these duties, it is considered tactically defective. As a result of this defeat, serious problems such as losing a tank occur. This is how we can summarize the general problem in the Russian army. After the tank losses in Avdiivka, Bilohorivka near the Donetsk Oblast is another region where the Russian army suffered tank losses. A 31-second video posted on social media captured the moment when a Russian BMP-1 infantry fighting vehicle was targeted by anti-tank guided missiles near the village of Bilohorivka. Ukraine's 10th Mountain Assault Brigade neutralized the IFV while advancing over open terrain. The Russian BMP-1 appeared to have stopped with absolutely no cover. When the atom hit it, an explosion engulfed the IFV, which was left on the field as a burning hulk. There were no survivors from the vehicle. In summary, Ukrainian forces continued to hunt both Russian soldiers and Russian tanks on land with successful offensive operations. Ukrainian artillery and missile units are destroying Russian headquarters and important supply lines. It is frequently used on the front lines with Ukrainian anti-tank missiles. As winter turns to spring in 19th century Europe, this is how war is waged for Bakhmut. A 19th century weapon still slays men in Black Ukraine. Now, the small town of Bakhmut in Donbass is a wasteland of shattered buildings and trees. However, both sides are determined to fight fiercely for this land. The understanding is that the war will continue. Russia seems determined to lose hundreds of thousands of lives in the long run. The most important European conflict since the end of the Second World War looks set to continue for a while.